Hey there, Jets fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jet Fuel Podcast. We hope you're enjoying your 4th of July weekends. And if you're traveling somewhere to a lake house maybe, or going on vacation, need something to listen to, we hope we've got you covered for wherever you may be traveling. I am Matt Barbado, founder, editor-in-chief of nyjetfuel.com. I am joined by my co-pilot, fresh off of his big move, Max Marcilla. And we are here to talk about a couple of positional previews on this beautiful Sunday. And we'll also break down our best of the Jets countdown. We ranked numbers 20 through 17 this week, and we will start with that. So in our best of the Jets countdown, we started with number 20, Ardarius Stewart. Number 19 was Josh McCown. Number 18 was Marcus Williams. And number 17 was Kelvin Beachum. So, Max, to get this show started, what does it say about the roster that we have one rookie in Stewart and a journeyman, pretty lousy quarterback in Josh McCown among the top 20 players on this roster?
Well, it just says how, mediocre this roster is, and mediocre might even be a compliment to the Jets, who pretty much got rid of all of their veterans, all of the players with any sort of nice resume, any Pro Bowlers, All-Star, All-Pros. They got rid of them, whether it's Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. You look on the defense, Darrelle Revis, David Harris. They got rid of them. It's a new-look roster, so it shouldn't be that surprising that there's, a couple of these guys, a Josh McCown, an Ardarius Stewart, a third-round guy. It shouldn't be a surprise that they're on the list, but, you're looking forward, if you're the Jets, you hope that some of these rookies that cracked the roster just because of upside don't turn out to be just hype because of upside. You look at Devin Smith, and you put rookie Devin Smith on this team, and he's in our top 20, no doubt, just off of upside and potential. The thing is, you got to hope they stay healthy. You got to hope they can produce on the field. So that's what I think we'll see with Ardarius Stewart. He's kind of a shoo-in to make the top 20 because of what's around him. But the Jets just got to hope this isn't all upside, and that's all he ever is.
Yeah, I think just to give the readers a bit of an inside glance into how we sort of decide this list, we at least I gauge it on three things. The player's potential for that upcoming season, his past production, particularly with the Jets, but in some cases you have to, go deeper into people's careers, and then just what their role is going to be in 2017. So a guy like McCown, again, he's not going to be – is he one of the – where does he rank among starting quarterbacks? Likely week one starters. He's got to be like 30th at the best. So, but he's a guy who's going to play, and he's a guy who has played well sparingly throughout his career, but he does have a little bit of a good track record. Nothing to really write home about, but he has had some good runs. And, I think you would agree, Max, we had a pretty tough time hashing out 20 through 17 because we had a lot of different guys who were in the mix in like that 20 to 25 range, who we kind of were all over the place in that regard. So, I think just the uncertainty, usually we're at a pretty decent consensus. But when you dump guys like Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall and Darrelle Revis and Nick Mangold all in one offseason, it kind of pushes a couple of guys up the list a little bit. My greatest point of contention was Kelvin Beachum. And this was one that I wrote sort of begrudgingly, but Max and Adam Zalonka, our third member of the Jet Fuel podcast, was not with us today. You guys sort of talked me into replacing nose tackle Deion Simon with him. So, Max, why don't you sort of explain why we have Kelvin Beachum not only in the top 20, but why you thought I was wrong in leaving him off the list?
Well, I think it's wrong because what he did in years past before he was with the Jets, and last year he struggled, but he also was coming back from an ACL tear. So you have to kind of weigh it. Again, you break it down into three categories. What has he done in the past? Well, he had a couple of good seasons, and they were in Pittsburgh, tore his ACL, came back, and was not good at all last year. The Jets signed him, so you say, what to expect from him this year? Well, he's now, at this point in his career, he's a veteran. You would expect to get a starting job considering the Jets gave him some money. So what to expect? You would hope he could be a serviceable left tackle, protect the blind side of whoever's under center for the entire season, especially when it gets down to the future of, Christian Hackenberg and maybe even Bryce Petty. And then the third thing is, well, what will his role be? Again, he should start. So I think all of those things make sure he is on the list. Again, talent-wise, he's one of the better players on this roster. That's not saying much, but it's the concern about the injury and the injury history, how he came back from his ACL tear and did not perform like he did prior to that injury. So I think it's right to have him on the list. I think 17 is a more conservative spot, weighing the risk of how he played last year with the benefits of how he played prior to that injury.
Yeah, I mean, I when I first thought of Kelvin Beachum when we first discussed him, I said, well, what's the guarantee he's going to stay healthy? But he did have good production in Jacksonville. Pro Football Focus rated him pretty highly in 2014. He received an 85.6 overall grade. Granted, that's the only full season he has played in his 5-year career. So, again, I mean, it's staying healthy. That's my biggest concern. But what I kind of wrote at the end of this, and you can check this out at nyjetfield.com, our Best of the Jets series, the Jets are sort of banking on Beachum to return to that form. They gave him a 3-year contract worth $24 million, and it really, they can't get out of this deal until 2019, and it's still not really a pretty, exit. So I think the Jets are really banking on Kelvin Beachum to be the starting left tackle for at least the next 2 seasons. What happens at the end of his deal when he's, 30 years old is a whole different story. But, I think Beachum is expected to sort of get back to that, very solid starting left tackle level. I'm just not sure if it's going to happen. And listen, I think it's crazy to expect, DeBrickashaw Ferguson to reincarnate ever again. But the Jets need some sort of competency at the position. And I'm just worried this feels more like a Ryan Clady sort of acquisition, where, again, it was another relatively high upside, low-risk sort of move. I don't see nearly as much upside as I did with Clady, and I think there's a little bit more risk. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit more because Beachum's not as talented of a player. But again, he has shown in the past he can be a reputable left tackle. So you have to hope as a Jets fan that he can be at least respectable. And, if he is and, the rest of the other tackle spot sorts itself out, the Jets are looking at a pretty decent offensive line in 2017, that's good for a potential offense that could be led by Christian Hackenberg at some point in the season.
Right, and we'll delve more into the offensive line later. Second half of the show, we're going to talk about some of the Jets' positions. We're going to start linebacker and offensive line and, preview those positions heading into training camp. But one more thought on Beachum and the offensive line. You compared it to Ryan Clady, and Matt, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think there's a lot more risk for the reasons you shelled out. It's a 3-year deal. It's not like there's an easy buyout or an option where he could be cut and the Jets would save money. I think it's definitely more risky than Clady. You also have to remember last offseason, the Jets were, in most people's minds, I'm sure the front office and quite frankly in our minds, they were a borderline playoff team because of what they did in 2015. So last offseason you say, all right, we can swing a trade, send a late round draft pick for Clady. It's a 1-year deal, possibly a rental, and all he has to do is do enough to get this team to the playoffs. Of course, Clady was the least of their concerns as far as making the playoffs, but it was a low-risk move that even a year later, I still don't fault the Jets for making. This is a move where it says a lot about the Jets' trust in him to stay healthy and to bounce back from 2016. I don't dislike the move. I can't say I'm crazy about it just because there is a little risk involved, but I think that Beachum for sure deserved this spot.
Yeah, and you know what? I had a hard time with it. I disagreed originally, but we will see. I still think Deion Simon should have been on the list. Maybe not as high as 17, but that was a clean swap. So Deion Simon will end up being in our honorable mention. So to wrap up this segment, should we give a little bit of a teaser of who to look ahead to, Max? What do you think?
Well, you'll see Leonard Williams at some point. There's your teaser. He made the top 20.
That's all you want. That's all you want to give away.
No, I'll tease it a little bit more.
So we're gonna do 16 through 13 this week.
Yes, we do 4 players a week for 5 weeks. That'll lead right up to about training camp. Might be a day or two after.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have this week, so we have 4 players: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. In no order, we have a newcomer to the Jets, a rookie, so another rookie on the list, and we have 2 returning reserves who now might have bigger roles. So there's your teaser for what we have this week. It should be fun. You can, of course, feel free to debate with us at New York Jet Fuel on Twitter. Send in your thoughts as we publish them throughout the week. But it should be a fun week. Again, this is what, our 3rd or 4th year doing this. This is as hard of a time as we have had ranking the Jets. It was easy when there was Darrelle Revis and players of that caliber on the roster. It's a lot harder when you have to put Josh McCown somewhere. So it should be a fun week.
Yeah, and if you got a gripe with someone who we put on the list, if you think if you want to back my argument on Deion Simon and say he should be on the list, feel free to tweet at us at New York Jet Fuel, at Real Matt Barbado, and at mmarcilla98. Feel free to engage with us on this because it was a tough list to assemble this year. And it's never easy, but this, like Max said, this was as hard as it has ever been for us since we've done this series. So, feel free to, embrace debate with us about the Best of the Jets series. We're going to take a quick time out. I'm going to get my barking dog out of the room. When we come back, we're going to break down a couple of positions. We're going to talk about the linebackers and the offensive line. Welcome back to the Jet Fuel Podcast, our little summer podcast for you. I am Matt Barbado, joined by my co-pilot Max Marcilla. Just got done discussing the first 4 players in our Best of the Jets top 20 countdown. A very interesting conversation considering there are so many question marks on this roster. Really, we can only really settle on maybe the top 3 players to rank on this list. So it should get more interesting as we go. Be sure to keep an eye out for that starting on Monday with number 16. So keep an eye out for that. Now we're going to start discussing one of our other off-season / summer series, positional previews. Obviously, there is a lot to dissect. We started with the linebackers, and it was my article. And, of course, on the day we published my linebackers preview, David Harris was cut. So it wasn't just David Harris who kind of got screwed by the Jets that day. It was me, and it was you, the readers, because I wrote a lot about David Harris in that. So the Jets linebacking core is what it is now. The likely starters are going to be now Demario Davis, who was acquired from the Browns in a trade, former Jet too, and then Darren Lee coming into his 2nd season. And then on the edge, it should be Lorenzo Mauldin and Jordan Jenkins. We'll see how that goes. But, Max, what do you think this unit will look like without David Harris for the first time in a decade? Do you think it takes a significant step back without him?
I don't think it takes a significant step back because I don't think it was that great of a unit to begin with. It's a pretty seamless transition from David Harris to Demario Davis. Again, it made the Jets' decision to cut Harris a bit easier when they knew that they had an experienced NFL veteran and even one who's played in the Jets' defense and in that system. Yep. They had him to come right in. So as far as what the unit will look like, well, we know that Jordan Jenkins and Lorenzo Mauldin will probably start the season on the outside, and those are the wild cards of the unit. You want to see Mauldin. It was kind of like a tale of 2 seasons for Lorenzo Mauldin. His first year, he came along, 3rd-round guy, and he made an impact. You can say, oh, wow, a mid-round guy coming in and getting to the quarterbacks, getting sacks, and you penciled him in as a starter in 2016. And then in that 2016 year, he was underwhelming. He just seemed like he couldn't put pressure on the quarterback with the same efficiency that he did in year 1. And that was something we saw from Jordan Jenkins, the other outside linebacker, where in his year 1 in 2016, he was able to get to the quarterback, especially toward the end of the season. He was very good on the outside. So those are the 2 wild cards. You want to see Jordan Jenkins, not have that sophomore slump that Mauldin had. And on Mauldin's end, well, it'll give you good insight as to, is he Lorenzo Mauldin from year 1, who could be a rotation pass rusher from the outside, or is he Lorenzo Mauldin from year 2, who, quite frankly, might not have a spot on the Jets next year?
Right. Lorenzo Mauldin was a bad player last year. Here's from my article, which you can check out on nyjetfuel.com. Don't mind the David Harris mentions. I know. Don't give me flack for that. I wrote it on the day he got released. So the one big number is 5.5. That is the number of of sacks recorded by Jets outside linebackers last season. And when I look at this unit, the first thing I think of is, what have the Jets lacked for the past, 5 years? They really haven't had a good edge rush. They've really lacked that on the outside. They've always had a very good defensive line. They've had a pretty good secondary occasionally, but they've never really had that edge rush. And, they tried it with Sheldon Richardson playing outside linebacker. It didn't work. He's just a much better player with his hand in the ground. And you're going to look to guys like Malden and Jordan Jenkins to step up in the pass rushing department. The problem is, I don't know what the heck the Jets have in Lorenzo Malden. In the end, I don't think it's much. And Jordan Jenkins was drafted to be an edge sealer. He's not really a great pass rusher by any means. Coming into his rookie year, everybody expected him to be that edge sealer. And, he recorded as many sacks as Malden. He had 2.5 sacks. The problem is, it's just, how do you only get 5.5 sacks from your entire group of outside linebackers? So if the Jets are going to have any significant improvement on defense this year, it's going to start with better edge rushing. You look at the really, really good teams in this league, the really, really good defenses like the Denver Broncos. They have that threat on the outside, and it's not just Von Miller. It's Shane Ray too. They have multiple guys who can rush the passer at a stand-up position in a 3-4 defense, and that's what the Jets sorely lack. And in terms of the inside linebackers, I agree. Davis is comparable to David Harris. I don't expect to see much of a change there. Lee's the wild card for me because we don't really know what his role is. I don't know if he's going to be a true inside linebacker next year. We'll see if the Jets move him around more. I think if Lee takes a big step up, this unit gets a lot better. But I just don't know what he is right now either. And I think there's just a lot of question marks on the starting unit in particular.
Yeah, and quickly, one more thing on Jordan Jenkins. Pro Football Focus has a stat, pass rush productivity, which they define as a measure of pressure created on a per-snap basis with weighting towards sacks. And Jordan Jenkins, believe it or not, for 3-4 outside linebackers, was number 2 in the NFL for weeks 14 through 17.
Wow.
Now that's only behind Joey Bosa, who very good rookie year and was a top 3 pick. So what does that tell you? Well, first of all, it's a small sample size. Weeks 14 through 17 is 4 games. And what else does that tell you? Well, he has potential. Of course, we saw him as the year went on get better and better. The big thing is, can he avoid that sophomore slump? And going with your point on Darren Lee, I think you're right in that he is a wild card. Really, this whole unit is cards.
Yeah.
The one guy you really think you know what you're getting is Demario Davis, and even he hasn't played on the Jets in a year. So who knows? Maybe he grew a little bit in Cleveland, or maybe he will falter by not being in the system for a year. We don't really know, but we have a much better idea of what we're getting out of him because he's played a couple more years. He's more of a veteran. And then looking forward, Jordan Jenkins and the outside pass rush will really define this unit, but Darren Lee is so vital because you look at the rebuild of the Jets. You want to look at a good rebuild. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers. Trust the process. And they just draft. And you got to hope the guys are good. You get picks, you draft guys. That's what the Jets have done on defense. They get picks. They draft a guy like Darren Lee. They draft a guy like Jamal Adams. And if this defense will truly be a good defense, the Jets are going to need all of those draft picks, especially the first-round guys, to be good.
Is there a depth guy when you look at this roster who you're sort of excited to watch? Because I'm just reading, some of the depth players at the position. We got another dog going off. Man, it is dog day on the Jet Fuel podcast, I'll tell you.
Clearly, Buddy was intrigued by the Jordan Jenkins comparison.
Yeah, but I think Buddy's liking Jordan Jenkins in 2017. How many sacks, Buddy?
He left the room, someone at the door, but do you care for my opinion or just the dogs on this show?
Give me a sack. Give me a sack total for Lorenzo Malden and Jordan Jenkins combined.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Throwing me under the bus with this one. I'm gonna say I'm gonna take a more conservative pick because I don't think the Jets. Look, the NFL is one of those sports where all 11 players matter on every single play. Jets secondary isn't very good, so I think, or at least at the cornerback position. So I don't think the Jets pass rushers will have a ton of time to get to the quarterbacks. I don't think the numbers will be tremendous. I think Jordan Jenkins will increase his sack total from 2.5 to maybe like 3.5, 4. I think Lorenzo Malden will kind of stay at that 2 sack range. So I don't see a lot of production as far as numbers, but I do like what Jordan Jenkins will bring in year 2.
Do you think like Freddie Bishop or Josh Martin or Julian Stanford or Dylan Donahue, you think any of those guys, Dylan Donahue's a rookie, you think any of those guys can really present, anything significant to the table this year? Maybe Bishop, who's from the CFL and was a highly touted rusher, but didn't really play much in his first season. I just don't see, outside of those 4 guys who are all wild cards, I don't see a ton of upside in the depth either.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But, you look at a couple of the guys you mentioned, and they have production, just not at the NFL level. You look at, the rookie Dylan Donahue played at, I forget the school he played at, but
West Georgia, I believe.
West Georgia, right. I was going to say, it was a school I've never heard of, and most people probably didn't hear of until they learned his name during draft season, but he was incredibly productive. And I think I might have said this either off air or on another one of our podcasts. When you get these guys who are very productive from a small school, there's one of 2 things. Either they, benefited from the talent that was around him or lack of talent, or they're just a very good player who they have the natural skills. So I'm intrigued by Donahue most out of all of those guys. You could say the same thing about Bishop, another guy who succeeded at the CFL level, just not at the NFL yet. I think these guys will get a chance to show what they can do at the NFL level. I mean, this is the year to do so when you have honestly no playoff aspirations and you just kind of want to learn what you have out of these young guys. So this will be the year the Jets can test these guys out. But I'm intrigued by those 2.
Yeah, I agree. Dylan Donahue actually set the Gulf South Conference. He set the conference record for single season sacks with 13.5 sacks in his second season. He had 12 sacks the year before. So, I mean, he comes in with a pretty impressive college resume. Freddie Bishop has a similar resume in the CFL. But, yeah, I really want to see what those guys are made of because I don't know how long the leash is going to be for, like, a Lorenzo Malden, who really kind of stunk up the joint last year. If he takes another step back, I wouldn't be surprised to see Donahue starting mid-season maybe. So it's a unit full of wild cards. I think that's a really good way to describe it. And I don't know. It's not like there's a ton of newcomers. It's just kind of a throw your hands up and say, I don't know what to make of this unit. So we'll see. I think there's a little bit of upside, but I wouldn't expect a ton of great things from the Jets linebackers this year. We'll see if I'm wrong. Shifting gears, we're going to go to the offensive side of things here. Talk about the offensive line. Max, you wrote this preview. Again, we mentioned this earlier in the show. The loss of Nick Mangold will hurt. He'll likely be replaced by Wesley Johnson at center. We've already talked pretty significantly about Kelvin Beachum. What about the other 3 guys? How about Carpenter, Brian Winters, and then who's going to start at right tackle? I guess we should start with that.
Well, it'll be a competition, I think, between Brandon Shell and Ben Ijalana and Brent Quale. And
don't forget about Quale.
Brent Quale every offseason has a chance to win a starting job. And I'm not saying he's bad or anything. I'm just saying he seems like he's always in this position. Like I'm a Mets fan, and you look at a guy like Rafael Montero who started on Sunday. Here's a guy who just every time you look up when another pitcher gets injured, he gets thrown in and gets to make a start. It's kind of like the cat with 9 lives. That's how Brent Quale is. But of the other 2 guys I mentioned, Ben Ijalana got some time at left tackle last year. He was all right, but that experience should help him. And then Brandon Shell, a favorite among Jets Twitter.
Yeah, really.
It's interesting. It's really interesting because he only played 204 snaps, but he was very good in those 204 snaps. Pro Football Focus gave him a 79.9 grade, which would rank him in the top third of NFL tackles. And he has, everyone knows, the NFL pedigree. He's the great nephew of Art Shell, a former All-Pro tackle. So we all know, the last name, and he was good last year. But it's important, the number to remember, 204. Only 204 snaps. Small sample size, only like 2 or 3 starts. So again, we're going to use the term, he's a wild card. Jets are going to use this year to see what they can get out of their young guys. And then as far as the other two guys you mentioned, so we talked Beachum. Wesley Johnson will take over for Nick Mangold, and there's a similarity on both position units. We talked about linebacker and offensive line, where the top guy has been here for a decade, David Harris and Nick Mangold, now no longer here. So we'll get an interesting glance at to what Wesley Johnson can do as far as replacing Mangold. But as far as Carpenter and Winters, I think they are two of the better players on this Jets team. I think Brian Winters, he got a 4-year, $29 million extension. It was smart of the Jets to lock him up. He was good last year. I think he gets a little overhyped because of the contract he got, but he is definitely a solid starting NFL guard. Not a Pro Bowler, not an All-Pro, not any of that, but he is a solid starting guard who's young and now is a Jet for 4 years, and Jets fans should be excited about that. And then the other guy, James Carpenter, believe it or not, and we'll get to him on our Best of the Jets list, I had him very, very high. I won't give away where I had him. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think he is one of the best players on the Jets. And he had a tremendous 2016 season, 83.0 grade from Pro Football Focus, 17th among guards, and 88.1 pass blocking grade, 10th best in the league. So I think he's definitely the best on this unit. And I think the guards will make this unit good. And around them, it's just about development and developing guys like Ijalana, Shell, Johnson, and maybe even Kelvin Beachum if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think the Jets' offensive line could be surprisingly decent. And that's the first time I've said that in a long time. I've sort of been hammering the Jets for not really addressing the offensive line enough. And I don't know, I feel like I'm almost copping out of that argument, but maybe it could be decent. I mean, you've got James Carpenter, who is a very good starting offensive lineman. You've got Brian Winters, who is a good starting offensive lineman. I don't think Brian Winters is ever going to reach the level of Carpenter, and I don't think his ceiling is incredibly high, but I think he's good and I think he's reliable, and that's okay. That's okay to have in a, right guard. But then you got major questions on the perimeter. We've talked about Beachum, and I'm not optimistic that even if he does play healthy, that he will be a spectacular player for the Jets. And then you don't know what. I understand how many people were impressed by Brandon Shell, but he only started 3 games. Sure, he didn't allow a sack. That's great, but I want to see him go out and win the starting job over Ben Ijalana, who hasn't really been much of anything for the Jets. I want to see him win that job in sort of dominant fashion, and then let's see what he can do over a full 16-game sample size. The best case scenario for this Jets offensive line is it could be like pretty good, like a top 15, top 12 unit. But that scenario assumes Beachum stays healthy and is decent, and Shell and Johnson, sort of develop. And I'm kind of confident in Wesley Johnson. I think he's gotten a lot of experience with Mangold missing a few games the last couple of years. I think that'll pay off, and I think he's been around the team for a little while now. So I don't know. I think this unit could be surprisingly decent. I'm not quite sipping the Kool-Aid on Brandon Shell yet as the savior of the Jets offensive line, because I think that's just very premature. But we'll see. And Wesley Johnson had 8 starts last year, so that's worth keeping in mind. It's a little bit more experience than Shell, but it's not a substantial amount. So we'll see. I think this unit has a little bit more upside than the linebackers, that's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think, this unit, the players in position right now, if all goes well for the Jets, these are the 5 guys you're going to line up for the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Because you have, mostly young guys, and they're all locked up. Carpenter, Winters, and Beachum on the outside, they're all under contract. And the young guys, the Jets drafted him. Wesley Johnson, Brandon Shell, Ben Ijalana. The pieces are there theoretically. The contracts, the draft, they got their guys. They just got to hope they're good. And I think that's the one position on the Jets you can say that about. Maybe you hope that you draft the right guys, and you hope, Lorenzo Mauldin could be the starter on the outside. I think the offensive line has the most legitimate chance of picking these guys because of what you said. Johnson has gotten experience over the last couple of years. Shell, I know, small sample size, but he was very good. So it's interesting, and I think this will be one of the maybe two best units on the Jets. I mean, if you're going to clump the secondary into one group, I like the safeties, not crazy about the cornerbacks. Obviously, the defensive line, it will be the cream of the crop for the Jets because that's where they put most of their draft picks in investing that defensive line. Other than that, I mean, I think the offensive line is right there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the units that actually has some decent upside. I'll say it again, though. I think I said this exactly last year, too, and I was dead on. One injury to this unit, it's over. You lose even Beachum, who Igelon on the left side. I don't know about that. If you lose a guard, I don't really trust anybody behind those guys. If you lose Wesley Johnson, then you got to go to your backup center, and I can't even name who that is off the top of my head right now on the roster. So, again, this line is not very deep, while I think there is some upside, I think there's an equal chance that this Jets offensive line is a disaster as there is a chance that it becomes a very good unit. That's what I'll say. I think it's very hard to predict what this group's going to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing I can predict with certainty, and I'm going to laugh if I'm wrong because I'm very confident about this, but I think James Carpenter will have another spectacular year. Not only was he very good last year, but he played in about 95% of the team's snaps. No one else, between all the injuries and rotations to the starting lineup, and nobody else last year on the Jets played in more than 86.4. That was Brandon Marshall.
Wow.
So James Carpenter played almost 10% more snaps than the second closest player. And what's crazy is that he had injury woes in Seattle, missed 19 games over his first 4 years. But ever since then, he's played in all 32 since joining the Jets. So I think James Carpenter is the staple of this unit, one of the best players on the Jets. And if I had to put my money on one guy to play well on this team, I'll tell you what, it might be James Carpenter. It might be Leonard Williams. It might be James Carpenter.
Yeah, if you're looking for consistency, I think that's your guy in Carpenter. That will conclude our Jet Fuel podcast. We went over a lot, so there's a lot to talk about in the summer at least. The Jets still have quite a few more, like 3-4 more weeks until they report to training camp. So we're going to keep doing these podcasts. We're going to preview different positions each show. We're also going to do our best of the Jets rundown because before you know it, it'll be training camp. And the Jets will be reporting to Florham Park. So we want to get you ready and primed for at least training camp in the summer to come with these shows. We hope they're helpful. We hope they're informational. And be sure to follow us on Twitter. You can follow Max at mmarcilla98. You can follow me at RealMattBarbado. And you can follow nyjetfuel.com at New York Jet Fuel. Also be sure to like us on Facebook. And be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or on SoundCloud if you use that to listen. We greatly appreciate your support. And thank you very much for listening to this Jet Fuel podcast. We will talk to you again real soon.